Once again, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the San Francisco Interfaith Council online briefing for faith leaders. Today's topic is the impact of COVID-19 on the 2020 census. This event is hosted by the San Francisco Interfaith Council and supported by the Joint Information Center of the San Francisco COVID Command Center. This morning's presentation will be recorded. Audio, video, and chat will be monitored and recorded for record-keeping, training, and quality assurance. By default, all participants will be muted and video turned off to minimize distractions. To submit a question or comment, select the chat button at the bottom of your screen and send a message to Q&A. A reminder that everyone who lives and works in San Francisco can get a COVID-19 test. To learn more about eligibility and details, please visit sf.gov/gettestedsf or call 311. Once again, welcome to this morning's presentation, and I will now hand it over to San Francisco Interfaith Council Executive Director, Michael Pappas.
Thank you so very much, and thank you to the team for the support that you offer us each week. I'm Michael Pappas, and on behalf of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, I want to welcome you to this week's online briefing for faith leaders. Already saddled with cybersecurity risks, hiring challenges, and wavering public trust, the 2020 census must now contend with a growing public health crisis. The uncertain timeline of coronavirus outbreaks could further complicate the constitutionally mandated headcount of every U.S. resident. Major disruptions could derail the Census Bureau from gathering accurate census numbers used to determine how many congressional seats and electoral college votes each state gets for the next 10 years. The data also guides the redrawing of voting districts and the distribution of as much as $1.5 trillion annually in federal funding for healthcare, schools, roads, and other public services to local communities. This week's online briefing, hosted by the San Francisco Interfaith Council and supported by the COVID Command Center's Joint Information Center virtual outreach team, will address the impact of the COVID-19 on the 2020 census. And now allow me to welcome the Chairman of the Board of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, Kaushik Roy.
Thank you, Michael. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kaushik, and as the chair of the board, it's my honor to welcome all of you to this morning's conversation. Interestingly enough, today marks 4 months from the day Mayor Breed announced that San Francisco would be going into a shelter in place. And I know it feels like it's been a lot longer than that, but I am personally very grateful that the Interfaith Council has been able to bring these weekly conversations, as well really as embracing a very unique role that the Interfaith Council can play during these dark times. And I don't do this as often as I could or probably should, but I want to specifically acknowledge our 2 staff members, because I am not sure if there are 2 other people in a nonprofit, probably anywhere in the country, that accomplish as much as our 2 do. Of course, our executive director, Michael Pappas, who's been an amazing leader during all this time. I also want to acknowledge another great leader who you don't see or hear from as much, but Cynthia Zambukis really is the person who makes sure everything happens the way it should and makes sure Michael looks as good as he does too. So I want to really just take a moment and let them know how much the board appreciates them, and let you know how much the city hopefully appreciates what they've been doing the last 4 months. I want to give a special welcome to any of you who are joining us for the first time. If this is your first time at an Interfaith Council gathering, thank you for being here. At the beginning of each Interfaith Council event, we do have an interfaith statement that we like to read, and I will do that now. This is an interfaith community. Whatever our individual belief, it can be freely expressed here with no apologies. If we are invited to offer a prayer in this setting, it should be offered according to the tradition with which we identify. If we are invited to speak on a subject from the perspective of our tradition, we are free to do so without fear of offending those who come from another tradition. We come together as people of faith to learn from each other that we might better understand the multiplicity of faith traditions in our city and in our world. Good morning, everyone.
Thank you, Kaushik, and thank you for your leadership and support. Cynthia and I could not be doing the work that we're doing without an amazing board and amazing leader as yourself, so bless you. At this time, I'd like to invite Fatih Atis, who is the director of the Pacifica Institute, a dear friend and Muslim leader in our community, to ground us in a meditative moment.
Thank you, Michael. Good morning, everyone. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of God, the most compassionate and the most merciful. Peace and blessings upon all of us. I would like to thank you to Michael, Kaushik, Cynthia, and Interfaith Council, and as well as all speakers and the panelists today for this important briefing about Census. Census is a great opportunity, comes every 10 years. Important because not only for the distribution of resources, it's also important to join if we want our voices to be heard. I invite all faith leaders to join me to encourage their communities to be counted. This morning, I would like to talk about first man, Prophet Adam, alayhi salam. Peace upon him, is first man, first messenger, and father of the humankind. So he's a great example of the humankind. His sincere and profound dua, prayer, in the Holy Quran is wonderful and inspirational to all humankind, I believe. His prayer we found in the Surah Al-Araf, verse number 23. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. رَبَّنَا ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا وَإِن لَمْ تَغْفِرْ لَنَا وَتَرْحَمْنَا لَنَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. Sadaqallahu al-Azim. Our Lord, we have wronged ourselves, and if you do not forgive us and do not have mercy on us, we will surely be among those who have lost. In this profound prayer in Prophet Adam, alayhi salam, starts with Rabbana. That means for me always, Prophet Adam reminds us, God is our Rabb, God is our sustainer, God is our Lord, and we are God's servant. No matter what, never forget this. And start with God's name if you want blessings for your life and prayer. Second point is ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا. We have wronged ourselves. If you do prayer and if you would like to enhance your relationship with God, then before Him, blame yourself for your mistakes, not anyone else. Do repentance and turn back to God immediately if you did any mistakes or if you feel you did any mistakes, small or big. And again, start with God's name with humbleness. Third point, and the last point for me, وَإِن لَمْ تَغْفِرْ لَنَا وَتَرْحَمْنَا لَنَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. If you do not forgive us and do not have mercy on us, we will surely be among those who have lost. No doubt, as humankind, we need God's mercy and help. But you believe in God, there is always hope. There is always, you can knock God's door for forgiveness. Never late. May God help us to understand and follow God's straight path. May Allah bless our gathering and our families and the humankind. Ameen.
Ameen. Thank you, Fatih, for this inspirational moment. As I introduce our featured presenter today, I'd like to just say that I've been in my position now for 13 years, and 10 years ago, Mayor Gavin Newsom appointed me to the 2010 Complete Count Committee, which was a cohort of stakeholders from every sector of San Francisco. And we gathered and we committed ourselves to go out and to ensure a complete count because there was so much at stake. I will say the milieu 10 years ago and today could not be more contrasted. It's like night and day. And the challenges, as I mentioned in the opening, have been just as contrasted. I would like to, at this point, welcome Andrew Lee, who is the Faith Census Hub Manager for the state of California. And he's working with communities throughout the state, faith communities throughout the state, to make his presentation now. And then afterward, to hear from some folks who are boots on the ground here in the faith community in San Francisco and the challenges they're facing, and then to respond to some of their questions. Andrew, we thank you for your preparation. We thank you for taking time to be with us, and we thank you for your important work today. And with that, I would turn the floor over to you.
Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you all today. Thank you so much, Michael, for the invitation. I am coming to you all from gloomy Los Angeles this morning, but it's nice to be with my friends in the Bay this morning. If my slides can be shared, that would be wonderful. But yes, like Michael mentioned, I am the Faith Census Hub Manager with Pico, California. And Pico, California is working with the State Complete Count Committee in engaging faith communities across the state. I first just wanted to mention a brief background bit, which is that I grew up in the Chinese and Taiwanese immigrant evangelical church down here in Southern California in LA and Orange counties. My father later in life became a pastor. So you could call me a PK if you want to. I haven't been in a lot of interfaith spaces until my work at Pico, so it's just really, really beautiful to be with you all today. Next slide, please. Well, while we wait for the slides to come back up, like I mentioned, I'm with Pico, California. We are responsible for the faith, what we're calling the faith sector, with the State Complete Count Office. For those who aren't familiar with us, Pico is the largest multiracial, multi-faith community organizing network in California. We're made up of 10 different federations across the state, from Del Norte County all the way to San Diego, and we're part of the Faith in Action National Network. You know, I think, like Michael mentioned up top, you know, the 2020 census and the moment we're in cannot be more different than what we've seen before. And I really think this is a moment where we're called to recast our imagination for the future that we want, and in building the grassroots power that we want for our most directly impacted folks of inequity to build that vision and what we in Pico call a state of belonging. And to us, it really is succinctly summed up in, you know, we are all people of faith who are all working together to build a California where everyone counts and everyone belongs. And that's not just something we want to say, right? We want that to actually mean something in our public life and in our public policy. And so for us, counting and belonging is actually about investment and about equitable investment. And so that is, you know, exactly where the census will come in. The census is one manifestation of this vision and this moral narrative that I know all of us in our tradition share together. And I think specifically for us, involvement in the census for us is about building grassroots leaders, building a pipeline of leadership development, and it's a stepping stone for all of us to reach some of our larger dreams and victories for our community. Next slide, please. I just coming into this morning knowing it was an interfaith space, I just wanted to share a little bit of myself. I think this verse from the book of Esther has been one of my favorites ever since I was a little boy, and I think it holds particular significance for us in this moment I had shared this, verse earlier with folks in the beginning of 2020, and oh boy, how much more do I need this verse to ground me every morning as we do such important work like I know you all are doing, which is just, we are in such a crazy moment that we're all in such unique positions that are uniquely positioning us to do really, really impactful work for our community. And I hope as we speak for the rest of this morning that we'll think about our own royal positions and why we are in the spaces we are at in this kind of moment. Just wanted to share that with you all. Next slide, please. Thank you. What's at stake? Boy, so much has changed since I started with the census work. I think at the beginning of the season, we were already fearing lower than expected participation because of the political climate, because of the historic underfunding of the Bureau. And obviously those fears have been compounded because of COVID. As a baseline, we say in estimates that 1,000 people, or I'm sorry, for every person counted every year, our communities gain $1,000. And so, if you want to extrapolate that out, it's $10,000 for every decade. And if folks aren't counted, those dollars that belong to us get spent elsewhere. And so I think this is just an important estimate to really, really nail down what, to nail down with a figure. And so that's important to note. I think as people of faith, we all hold special concern for our neighbors in need. And in census speak, we call these populations sometimes quote unquote HTC, which is hard to count. So folks who are housing unstable, who have low access to broadband, who have limited English proficiency, are immigrants or refugees. Many of the programs that receive census funding, such as Medi-Cal, serve these quote unquote hard to count populations. And if we undercount these folks, we risk underfunding and undercutting the very services that we have in our society that are designed to help them. And so already marginalized groups have the most to lose from an undercount, but the most to gain. And, I think we definitely do not want folks to be quote unquote missing in their own communities. And so that's why a complete count is so important. The next point here is about fair political representation. And so we know that accurate census data is really about setting the playing field on which we will do our work for the next decade. At the federal level, census data is used, as Michael mentioned, to redraw congressional districts. Here in California, it is estimated that we might lose a few seats, which is not great for our own representation. The Bay Area has seen the most population growth out of other regions in California, but other parts of California might be at risk of losing a seat. COVID's impact in particular in this area have been on the timeline of how districting is going to happen. The Bureau has requested a 4-month extension of some apportionment and redistricting deadlines, but obviously that will ripple into some other deadlines that we have in the state to do redistricting. Our redistricting commission oversees 177 voting districts. And so that's just something to continue to monitor as we continue to do the work into 2021. True population change is obviously out of our hands, but our participation in the census relative to other places really, really matters because it could help save us seats and get us the fair political representation that we deserve. And finally, accurate census data is incredibly important to enforce civil rights laws and anti-discrimination clauses. In particular, relevance for this year, the data is often used to maintain compliance with the Voting Rights Act. And specifically, which I think is important for folks like us who live in San Francisco and LA, which is it ensures language access at the ballot. Next slide, please. I know everyone here is very familiar, but these are just a taste of the many things that census-related funding goes to in California. California received $77 billion in census-related funding the last go-around. 80% of our total federal funding is census-related. And in particular for us, more than half of that, or more than half of our Medi-Cal budget comes from census. And so I think just to highlight here is these are programs, again, like I mentioned, that are specifically for our marginalized community members. And so it's just incredibly important that we have that in mind as we're doing our outreach. Next slide, please. Just to set a landscape quickly, I don't think it can be overstated enough, excuse me, of COVID's impact on how we were originally planning to do census outreach. But that with the underfunded Bureau, the funding for the run up to this census has fallen below levels for the last 3 census cycles. And so an accurate count is definitely at risk. And so we definitely need to be pushing harder as community members to pick up for that. A positive note is that here in California, we're all part of an unprecedented outreach effort. The state has allocated $187 million, the most ever in the state's history, working with 120 partners across the state to put forth the most robust outreach effort. So we're all in good company. For me in particular, I was very excited to be doing so many of the in-person activities, as I'm sure many of you all were, and to really provide that accompaniment that I think faith communities do so well with very intimidating processes like the census. And obviously the big pivot has been about digital outreach, and I'll speak more about that later. I continually will be repeating this for folks that I speak with, which is that there's no citizenship question on the census. That was blocked last summer. However, there is an ongoing effort by the administration to produce citizenship data through other records. Other states have already agreed to do so and help the administration produce those types of records through other agencies. But that's just something to keep on your radar and to continually monitor, as we know this has other ripple effects into our count as well. I already mentioned some of the political ripple effects coming that are going to affect redistricting and elections. Here in California, our redistricting deadline actually comes just 2 weeks after the revised date that the Bureau has said that they're able to send us that redistricting data. Obviously 2 weeks is not enough time to be redrawing maps, such an important process. And so that's another thing that we all need your participation in making sure that that's implemented equitably. And the last thing is, I think, wavering public trust. We've seen some of the latest research come out about census messaging, which is that the handling of the COVID crisis, folks' interaction with applying for benefits or other government interactions that they've had suggest wavering public trust. And so we really, really want to lean into our role as trusted messengers in faith communities to make sure that people are counted. And I'll speak a little bit more about that in a second. I will not speak too much about this, but do want to give you all the most updated information from the Bureau. I would say the most important things to flag here are that the new deadline has been extended to October 31st. And a benchmark to that would be next month, August 11th. And that is when NRFU, or what we call non-response follow-up, what a name, right? NRFU begins, which is when door knocks start to go out to folks who haven't responded on August 11th. One thing for San Franciscans to highlight is that unhoused people will be counted where they're staying in September. And that has been pushed back repeatedly just because of safety issues. Next slide, please. You all are the experts in your community, but I also just wanted to present the most updated self-response rate data to you all, just so you can have that in front of you. I think more importantly, what these numbers might hide and why it's so important to be disaggregating data, which points to another important function of accurate census data would be on the next slide, which is just a self-response map of San Francisco. The more red that a census tract is in, the lower percentage response rate that it has. And so I've been to San Francisco many times, and even my brief knowledge, I don't think that this map is unexpected, unfortunately. And so just want to give you all the most updated picture of where things stand currently. Next slide, please. Great. I think I've been asking myself this question ever since census work started, which is that as faith communities, what is it that we can uniquely say, or what is it that we're uniquely positioned to do in such mass effort? You know, we call every census like the most massive peacetime effort that a government can undertake right now. And so I think there's three things. And the first is serving as trusted messengers, particularly in times of uncertainty. I think we have such a unique role to play to demystify a lot of these can be intimidating civic processes. We see in research over and over again that the source of communication matters, the messenger truly matters. You know, those studies indicate that trust in the person who's relaying the message to you really influences how folks appraise the information that they receive, especially in times of change like right now. And I think at this point in the census season, when we're just 4 months out, we want to make this something that people will share with their friends and family, right? And so the desire to share has really also been linked to the carrier of these ideas. And it's the carrier, it's us, who are going to get our congregants, our members, to open up trust and spread this message to the people that we need to get to. The second thing I think we're uniquely positioned to do is we all have deep knowledge of our communities and deep relationships. And, you know, I think this is not rocket science, but I think a lot of the outreach, quote unquote, outreach methodology or outreach science has come to this point, which is that we cannot organize outside of relationships. We must lean on our relationships to get this message across. And I think we're particularly suited to be doing that well, especially in the precarious moment that we're in right now. The last point, which I think is the most powerful and excites me, you know, about this work every day, which is that as faith communities, we have unique shared moral narratives and traditions and language and principles that are going to help our folks, going to help our people make meaning of the moment that we're in, right? How does census connect to the things that we see on the news, and make meaning of the information that we're receiving about the census, and make meaning about what is the impact of completing the census, completing this kind of mundane task, right? To be very honest, but making meaning of the larger impact that's bigger than ourselves. For me, that really is that census for us is a collective act of faith that we all need to undertake to do together to build the type of state of belonging that we all want. Since doing this work post-COVID, I just wanted to share quick insights of some things I learned that hopefully will be helpful for you all in your own faith communities. Just want to share a little proud moment. These are some of our parent leaders in the Inland Empire with our affiliate Inland Congregations United for Change, who have been doing great food delivery work, but every food delivery comes with a census flyer and a census conversation. Next slide, please. So the first insight that I want to share is about contextualized messaging. And I think this really goes back to what I'm identifying as the role of clergy and as faith communities, that we're here to help people come out of despair and into action, right? And so we need to speak to the moment and be able to help our communities hold lots of issues together. You know, we are, as faith communities, I think we're multi-issue organizations and communities. And so how do we hold multi-issue conversations, and how do we hold multi-issue campaigns inside of our communities? I think right now we're really seeing three crises emerge, which is one, a crisis of public health, obviously, two, a crisis of economic disparity and mass unemployment, and 3, a crisis of racial justice reckoning that we're going through. And so, you know, some of the messages that you see here seek to address the things that we are seeing in our everyday lives and connecting it back to census. The first one being here is that lack of accountability and abuses of power, they're direct outcomes of Black communities in particular being undercounted and thus being underrepresented in our government and under-resourced. And that's the way it's been for generations. We have a recovery message, right? The census is absolutely critical to make sure that we emerge from the coronavirus crisis, to have the resources and essential services that we need to recover and to thrive. And, you know, lastly here, which is that this framing of the census around our future and around what we want for our future generations has been proven, at least in the message testing that's been done so far, as one of the most powerful drivers to completion, which is that the census is the start to reimagine our neighborhoods and reimagine the places that we want to raise our families in. And then the last 2 things here in gray would just be, I've been so moved by, you know, the faith communities that we work with in PICO, who have been able to talk about the census from the traditions of their faith. Whether it's, you know, one to highlight would just be some of our Jesuit brothers and sisters who have talked, you know, so powerfully about Catholic social teaching, See, Judge, Act, how the census is an act of truth-telling, and Jesus says the truth will set us free, right? And being able to uniquely speak and know how to talk the language of your community is so powerful. And the last thing here is a little bit more technical, which is that if you don't want a door knock on August 11th, respond now. Self-responding will be the most accurate way to make sure you're counted. And so please do that by August 11th. And I think that's another thing to just be aware of right now. On the next slide, I want to talk briefly about how I think there's this weird kind of dissonance and disconnect once we started moving from digital outreach, which is we think the digital world is so much different from the quote unquote real world. And for me, the lesson here is that digital organizing is still organizing. You know, our outreach work, even though it might be online or it might be virtual, it's still about relationships, and it's still about building deep relationships with people and bringing our humanity into this work. And so here's just a taste of some of the census videos that we have created so far, featuring some of our clergy leaders. But, you know, one thing I just want to highlight is that if there are, you know, virtual sessions or virtual videos or social media things that you're pushing, it really has taken me, for example, brainstorming every single person I'm going to ask to make a commitment to share this video, having an organizing plan around it, reminding people the day before, hey, you're on board with it, you're on board with this message, you're on board with sharing it, we're all doing this together so we can increase the reach of this message and increase the moral narrative, like I've mentioned before, about why it's so important to participate in the census. And so I really just want to encourage everyone that even though the digital world and digital outreach might be scary, we're experts in organizing, and whether that comes in the digital world or not, it's still about relationships, and to lean hard on those relationships, because that's what's going to carry us through. Next slide, please. The last insight and lesson learned, and the biggest, I would say, learning curve for me has been thinking integratively and thinking expansively about how we do census work. I think including census in all the areas of work that I know all of your faith communities are involved in is not only possible, there's a way to make that critical conceptual link for our people, but it's absolutely critical as we go into, I would say, you know, the next 4 months before the census deadline. And so here are just a few examples across the spectrum of how deeply integrated census might be in some different examples from some of our affiliates and some of our partners. So it could be something obviously as simple as including census in some of your newsletters, which is like what you see in the middle from Dolores Mission School. Something that you were already planning to do, like a Juneteenth celebration, and talking about census and how that relates to that history, and all the way to thinking about, how is it that we're presenting, in what ways are we presenting census to our folks? And are we presenting it as related to all of these other issues that we care so deeply about? And you'll see that with some events that our friends across the Bay at Faith in Action East Bay have put on. I think two things in particular to ask yourself would just be, is completing the census and telling others about the census, is it presented as an immediate next step of action? Is there assistance being offered about how to fill out the form? And a census talked about in a way to onboard people into the other areas of work that you're doing, or to strengthen your existing organizing or other outreach that you're doing in the community. Other examples, and we can talk more about these, I'm sure many of your communities have been doing listening campaigns recently. One way to listen and one way to help is to fill out your census, right? Some of our parishes that we work with have had really successful census work where we have a quote unquote census captain who's the go-to for all things census. And it's just really, really powerful to see a peer, doing that work with you. And, we've had many folks complete selfie campaigns with the actual census form, with the actual census website, to really put a human face on why it's so important to fill out the census. We formed what we call the Faith Census Hub, which is our resource repository, and it includes some of the things that are in here. Again, I'm sure you all have seen the millions and millions of census resources that are out there. And so it's really about thinking hard about what is it that's unique about our particular positions and our particular communities, and we're the experts in how we want to speak to them. And so I'm happy to share any of these resources with any of you. I think one thing in particular is in this moment of uncertainty, I think people are looking for ways to say yes, and we need to present things for them to say yes to. And so one example here is like this checklist you see on the right, which is, here are some ways that you can help in this new moment that we're in. Just want to leave you all with a few thoughts about how as faith communities we can be supporting the census work and supporting each other right now. The first thing would just be asking yourself, has my own house of worship, has my own clergy person talked about census in my faith setting? If so, wonderful. What more can we do? If not, why not? And how do we help our communities get to a point where they're willing to talk about it or able to talk about it? Two key drivers we're learning in some of the research to get people to complete the census is they need to feel good. They need to feel like they know a lot about how to complete the census, right? It's a 9-question survey. There's a lot of confusion about what those questions are or are not. But we really can lean into our role as trusted messengers in this regard. And then secondly is another driver, which is that folks need to learn about how census is such a high impact activity that has real impacts on their lives. And as faith leaders, I think, and we're uniquely positioned to help our people hold census in relationship to the other work you all are moving in your communities, but also what we're seeing in this moment right now. To just do a little bit of organizing here on the call, in PICO, we call our relational organizing reaching our homies and fam, right? These are the people who are closest to us, who are most able to move and are most willing and able to share our message. In San Francisco, just to drill it down and bring it home a little bit, if 9 households in each San Francisco tract can respond each day before the end of the month, we'd reach the 2010 rate. And I'm sure everyone on this call can think of 9 households that you're in deep relationship with to send a little message to them about census and start that kind of conversation. I also hope that we will each think of, a strategic messenger that we're in relationship with. And based on what you might be learning here on today's call, is there a resource that you're able to share with them to help them and support them to be involved in the census work right now. And then the last thing to flag is there's going to be a National Faith Communities Action Weekend that the Bureau has decided on, and national partners, we're all jumping on. And so we definitely want to invite you all to participate in the ways that you're able, July 24th through 26th. And I think it's just an invitation to think creatively about what is it that you can uniquely offer to your faith community that someone like the Bureau or someone at the state level might not be able to. And to lean into, like I mentioned, our royal positions for such a time as this. Thank you, everybody.
Andrew, thank you. This presentation has exceeded expectations, both in content as well as inspiration. You're very gifted, and we thank you for spending this time with us today. And I'm going to invite you unashamedly to engage us as we sprint to the last leg of the census. I did want to tell you that here in San Francisco, we have 800 communities of faith and religious institutions that include not only our houses of worship, but also our judicatories, academic and healthcare institutions, and social service agencies that provide the safety net for our most vulnerable residents. And they're the ones who know where the hard to count are. I will tell you from the outset of the census journey that the San Francisco Interfaith Council, with the assistance of a Coro Fellow, put together its own toolkit, if you will, and resource information packet for faith leaders that we have distributed. And we have used our network of 5,000 e-subscribers to continue to get census out. At the conclusion of today's program, we're going to include the recording link to this and any resources that you would like to share, and we will send that out. And again, we invite you shamelessly to engage us as we go into this last leg. I will tell you, the Interfaith Council could do nothing in terms of its work with the census without the support of incredible funders. And in particular, we want to say a special thank you to the San Francisco Foundation that has really committed itself and its resources to making sure that we have a complete count. We're very blessed to have with us today the Senior Program Officer in the Power Division of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, Tessa Callejo, who I've known for over a decade and am very proud to call a friend and a supporter of our council. And I'd like to invite Tessa to give us the funder's perspective and why the foundation is so committed, and then finally ask a question of Andrew for his response.
Thank you, Michael. It is a great pleasure to be with you this morning. And I want to do a shout out to Andrew to say that was a fabulous presentation. And the detail and the fact that we'll be able to share that with other faith communities is a great gift to us. I come to you today from the Miraloma neighborhood here in San Francisco as a longtime resident, someone who's raised family here and who will spend the rest of my life in this city and county. And I'm also a parishioner at St. John of God Catholic Church and have been active in that community for many years. In my prior role with the foundation, I was lead staff for the FACE program for about 20 years, one of the leaders. And so I come out of the work itself. I also worked at Catholic Charities, the Interfaith Coalition for Immigrant Rights. And so for me, I have no doubt in my mind that if we're going to have a robust turnout in San Francisco, it's going to be because we in the faith community mobilize and take on the challenge of what Andrew mentioned earlier, that we have a low self-response rate at this moment, that it's 60%. And by contrast, it's not just lower than California, but in Contra Costa County, it's over 70%, and it's almost 70% in Alameda. So there's something we need to grapple with, and we are being called today and going forward to be really an essential partner in this effort. I'm not going to repeat all the wonderful things that Andrew shared with us today. I just want to say that we're close to the pain and the struggle in our communities. We run food banks, programs for seniors, affordable housing, so many different areas where we see every day what resources do or don't do if they're missing. And so we're in the moment of a perfect storm. where ultimately all that Andrew shared about what had happened prior to this moment with the pandemic, the hiring challenges, citizenship question, all of that laid the groundwork for its super difficult census. And then we have the economic fallout as well from the pandemic and the public health implications. So I guess what I would say to Michael's earlier question, why would a foundation be so deeply involved? I first want to say we're not the only one, that we've got foundations throughout the state of California investing deeply. We're in relationship with an entire collaborative, the Bay Area Census Funders Collaborative, over 20 foundations here just in the 9 counties of the Bay Area that have mobilized philanthropic resources of over $3 million to organizations such as the one that Reverend Carolyn Ransom Scott will talk about, the effort with Wilma Baptiste, and also the Marin Interfaith Council, Jakara Movement, many organizations throughout the state. But for the San Francisco Foundation, this is our 3rd census that I've been involved with. I've been there quite a number of years. And it's not lost on us of who is most impacted by not being counted in our communities. And I want to be very specific that we focus on economic inclusion and racial equity. And so we're talking about our communities that are the ones that are hurting and are often the most excluded and discriminated against, whether that's African American, Latino, Asian American, Pacific Islander, immigrants and refugees, unhoused residents, and families with small children. These are the folks that are going to be undercounted, and then the resources will not come to our community for 10 years. So it is essential that we step up to the plate for this work. We're funding not just on a local level. As I mentioned, we're funding the San Francisco Interfaith Council for your work. We believe in the Interfaith Council. We did the census in 2010 together, and we're committed to this process currently, but also Asian Americans Advancing Justice, the Poder, Causa Justa, many organizations in our community, and statewide, Pico, California, and California Calls with their Black Census Project, and the Latino Community Foundation. So we're all in this together is the answer, and we see this as a joint effort. What have we seen as funders in terms of what are the multiple challenges facing folks now that we have the COVID-19 impact? I think a lot of them have been raised by Andrew, but just the ability to have the face-to-face outreach that we had organized and planned for isn't there. So we're doing so much of our work online or by text or by phone or Zoom calls. We're all now becoming Zoom experts, but there's a digital divide. And so wealthy communities and communities where English is their first language are the ones that have more technology at their disposal. And what we're seeing is that folks are struggling just to provide their services, let alone do the census. So I want to be very, very real about this. What we are seeing, we have a COVID emergency fund, is hundreds of organizations have come in, and we've mobilized hundreds of smaller grants to address the issue of how our communities are hard hit with job loss and food insecurity and the exclusion of particular communities. But so there we have our grantees and our organizations trying to do everything under the sun simultaneously, and really stretched, and staff who are really hurting themselves. Many of them are being displaced or are on the verge of eviction. So it is a very, very challenging moment. So how do we overcome these obstacles? We're the faith community. We are ambassadors of hope, and we are creative, and we are believers in that which we have not seen or will see in our lifetime. We have a mountaintop, and we know that we can aspire to that. So I guess what I'd say is lean into what Andrew said. There wasn't a hub like what Pico's providing 10 years ago. There wasn't the work that Reverend Norman Fong and Reverend Carolyn Ransom Scott are doing, or Michael and Cynthia. It's extraordinary. We have wonderful resources, but we've got to pull ourselves into this work, make that commitment that we're not going to be number 27 as the county. We're going to be in the top 10. We are not going to accept where we are today, and we have more than 2 months to go. And so I just want to give one example that isn't redundant of Andrew, which is we have a 5,000 person list, and there was an appeal for whether it's 9 or 10 contacts per person, and you got a 10% response. That's 500 people making 10 contacts to engage. That's 5,000 households that could be mobilized through that network with a little bit of organizing and creativity. And that translates over 10 years to $5 million, given the formula Andrew just spoke about. So it's real what we can do. And I think that Andrew really listed some of the best ideas. I mean, we still have online services, announcements, we have weekly bulletins, that the whole pitch around that you don't want the enumerators to come to your door. So why don't you do this first so that you don't have to, get that call? I think it'd be really helpful, but I think we got to dig deep and say, what's our message? And so if we really see ourselves as our brother and sisters keepers, if we see ourselves as justice seekers, then we have to be involved in this. We have to do this work. These are acts of justice, faith, and inclusion. So in closing, I just want to say one simple message. You are a trusted, essential ambassador for getting a full count in San Francisco. Don't for a minute think you aren't. And so if each and every one of us pick up that mantle, we will get this done, and we will get an extraordinary count, and we will exceed expectations. So I thank you for this opportunity. I thank you for your work. I'm a proud partner of the San Francisco Interfaith Council. And now I'd like to just ask a small question to Andrew, which is, given all of these, the challenges that we've talked about and the sheltering in place orders, et cetera, and we have an older population as well in the city, high unhoused population. Can you give us a few tips in terms of what do you think for faith community members out of your walk might be some of the top strategies that, given the time frame that we have? Andrew, what do you say to our folks?
Excuse me. Amen to like all of that you just said. But I would say it's hard just because I also just want to say like a word of encouragement, hopefully, which is that if you're feeling lost, we're all feeling lost. And we're all figuring things out as we go. And I think it's just encouraging to be, in a room full of people who are in the mess and figuring out things together. But I will say, I think this has really forced me to reevaluate, like, what are our like core, what is our core role and our core competencies? What are things that we've always been doing? And for me, that it sounds maybe cliche and kind of like fluffy, but we have to lean into our relational work. We have to lean into organizing around relationships. We have the deepest knowledge of our neighborhoods and the deepest relationships in our neighborhoods as faith communities. And so for folks who might be disconnected, who might not be comfortable with technology or having other challenges, et cetera, it really, it sounds so simple, but it really is like, we do this in Pico all the time. Like, I'm gonna force us right now to think of 9 people that I'm gonna send a resource to today. These are the things I'm gonna send them to, hold each other accountable, or hold each other accountable to making those contacts and doing the follow-up. It's not rocket science, but it's hard work, but we're all doing it together.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tessa, and thank you, Andrew. Back in 2009, when I was appointed to the Complete Count Committee, I met some really wonderful people in San Francisco, not the least of whom is Reverend Norman Fong, who at that time was the executive director of the Chinatown Community Development Center. Since then, he has joined the board of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, and I served together with him on the Complete Count Committee for 2020. He is a parish associate at the Presbyterian Church in Chinatown and probably has the best pulse of his community. And I would invite Norman to offer some thoughts on some of the challenges in the Chinatown community, as well as to pose a question to Andrew.
Okay, right on, Andrew. You're an organizer. Pico, yes, all the way. I worked with Pico and organizing the hotel workers way back when. But anyway, I'm glad to be here. I'll keep it short, Michael. I'll try to be quick. In 2010, we found out, and the whole city found out, that no one was getting their census forms in Chinatown because they didn't have mailboxes. Remember that? So a decade ago, we have changed. We didn't get the US Postal Service to deliver to everybody because they don't have the person power, but we did add mailboxes to every SRO hotel. So that's good news, right? Yay. This year, 2020, I have seen so many advertisements. Every day in Chinese TV, I see something on the media now. So that's been really great. And I appreciate Tessa that a lot more CBOs, community-based groups and faith-based groups are getting small bits of funding. So there's more inclusiveness and community engagement, relational organizing, as you call it, than ever before. But then COVID hit. Oh, so I'm gonna keep it short. Like I said, language access is a problem. Seniors, they can't even answer the phone and stay on the robocalls long enough to fill out, the 9 questions or whatever. So I have a suggestion, practical. I don't want to wait till August 11th, door-to-door knocking, enumerators. We need them now. We need enumerators now. They can join us. Specific requests. I know my church is listening in on this, Jeanette Huey. We pass out food every Saturday, even throughout SIP. People are coming from Chinatown, from their SROs to get food. Can we get an enumerator at our church every Saturday and sign them up right there? There's more we can do now. Self-help. All the community groups are beginning to reopen their centers. And we could, and churches too, if there's ways that we can have enumerators hands-on helping us, it would be wonderful. So otherwise, the fear is this: come August 11th, who's gonna walk into a Chinatown SRO? It's too dangerous still. There's no shared kitchens and bathrooms, and we deliver thousands of food items by box. We just knock on the door, don't open and go in. So I don't know if things will improve by August 11th. So therefore, I'm suggesting that we take advantage now of all the food programs, not just give them a flyer, you mentioned that, but actually use those opportunities to do some census taking right there on the spot. What do you think, Andrew? Can you do that? Get us more enumerators?
I wish. There are so many things that I think all of us would love to advocate to the Bureau for. I think one thing I just want to note is that the August 11th date is really important for us. But self-response, which is the most encouraged method, is open all the way through October 31st. I think August 11th is just our mental benchmark of, I think, a place that we probably want to be. In terms of, I think, folks who are seeking assistance and are seeking that personal accompaniment that I think we were definitely originally banking on so much of the work to move through. I think one really simple thing to just note is that one thing that I've seen is folks working with others and preparing their answers for the census in advance. So it's in the toolkit, it's on the website. Is looking at the paper form or going through the website yourself, figuring out what the questions are, and helping maybe some of our folks who live in the SROs or some of our elders to prepare those questions in advance, just to demystify and give folks that feeling of preparation and safety before they go into what could be an intimidating interaction. And I will say that there are ways that I can talk to folks, offline, specifically, there are ways for us to continue to accompany folks and be on the phone with them when they're on the hotline, to be on the computer with them, if that's the way that they want to. But there are methods, and we definitely, can use the creativity that is within all of us, because this is just who we are. This is just the work that we do.
Thank you, Reverend Norman Fong. And our last but not least faith panelist is somebody I came to know who was of great assistance when we were doing work with the homeless and Project Homeless Connect when I first began this position and probably was the best organizer, if you will, in the Bayview Hunters Point. And that's the Reverend Dr. Carolyn Ransom Scott, who is the founder and CEO of Urban Missions. As Tessa mentioned, she is working with an SFIC board member, Wilma Batiste, and has done some incredible work with the census. And I'd like for her to briefly share that now and then pose a question to you. So Reverend Scott, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael, and thank you for this time. Andrew, thank you for that refreshing presentation. It was great. Tessa, yes, we are our brother's keeper, and we're the ambassadors of hope. And it's not been easy. There's been obstacles, racetrack courses. And so in spite of the obstacles and due to shelter in place, I can report, yes, Michael, I was blessed to have the great team beside me. And we've been working on this out of the box. Wise Prep University, Danny Kim, the development director, and through my team members, the Warriors, along with the support of Michelle and Tessa with the San Francisco Foundation, we were able to get small funds, but it made a difference. And we're just still looking for funds because we're running out. But we continue to reach out to District 10, 5, Tenderloin, Richmond District, and even Norman, Chinatown. I'm working with David Hung, and I've sent him information and sent him and pulled up with Michael's toolkit. We found tons of information in the Chinese language. So we're asking Leanna Louie and David Fung to get with the people and help publicize things. We're posting, we have essential workers that we've connected with. I've called some of our essential workers that deliver the meals, Tessa, and that are out in the field daily. And so they're also over at least 25 housing units. So they go into these places. So we're reaching and have reached hundreds and thousands already. And what we're doing as we pass out this information, thank God for the delivery and giving of masks. We've had 20,000 masks that we're putting with the meals, and it gives us the opportunity to have a conversation about the census. And in that conversation, we're signing up people as they stand in line and come for their meal. We're going door to door as they deliver the meals, the essential workers, but there's still a lot of obstacles. They're using masks. We were able to give masks to the clients as well as gift certificates for signing up. So they got a $5 gift certificate for Starbucks or gift certificates for getting others. This has been a great help. It's been a great help. But it's been a lot of meetings, briefings, coming out of the box with the social media, Twitter, some of the things I just have never used ever. Instagram, Facebook, but we're posting daily. We're posting daily. So we're calling our essential workers that are moving for us. They're our ambassadors. And yes, we are ambassadors of hope. They are posting, they are delivering, they are sitting with people, and they are signing people up. And to prove it, in order for them to get their extra benefits, we're paying them, and then they get gift cards for signing people up as well. So they get screenshots. They send the screenshots to us. They get the extra cards. So all of this is working. We've got wonderful, besides the Warriors, wonderful young man who's over his own arts theater, and he's with Motown. He's come aboard. He sings wonderfully, but he too is helping us reach the community. So we've reached and continued to contact our District 5, District 10. We are going door to door with deliveries. We are meeting in groups and at the rallies. I make sure as we're addressing the hard things that are happening now, the racial pandemic as well as COVID, we are saying too, don't forget in all of this, the census. We can march, we can stand, we can demonstrate, but if we do not do this census, if we do not vote, we're in trouble. So that's our message that we're adding to this, and that's our target. And so I will close with my question. We face and still need to reach a multitude of people that are out there. And so the question is, with there being so much more territory to cover, the need to build the numbers of well-trained enumerators is what I found. Supervisors and managers, with all of the delays within the Census Department, the challenge of COVID and resting in place has changed a lot of their training from the 2-day training to a 4-hour. I found personally in that process, a lot of the supervisors and managers gave different answers and information. Do you think with all of these delays and the obstacles that October 31st is a fair date that's set out? Do you believe this closing date for our census is fair and set out far enough?
Such a good question. You know, there has been discussion and it has been floated for an even longer extension. I think I was very pleased originally that the Bureau was willing to move the census, you know, back to October 31st pretty early on during the coronavirus issue. You know, I think there's definitely a lot of room for us as the faith community and us as, you know, us as community partners coming together to do more advocacy to our state, you know, our state census office, but also to the Bureau around many of the things that we know are very incredibly effective, which is the amount of numerators that we need. And also there's been talks about increasing the amount of mailers and mailer follow-ups and sending an actual paper form again. And so definitely would invite everyone here to, you know, join in those efforts. And I'm happy to help connect folks to those tables if you're interested. You know, at the same time, I think like has been mentioned, you know, this principle of, like, I think mutual aid has been very powerful to me, which is that we can't wait. While we do this advocacy, we cannot wait. We are the people we've been waiting for, right? And we know that there are so many things going on, and I think part of the challenge is that awareness has gone up, but completion has not necessarily gone up. And many of the messages that are more at the mass level, I think, to be very honest with you all, can ring hollow to many of our marginalized communities who rightfully do not have much trust in our public civic processes. And so the message for us, I think, is, yes, I hear you and I hear those concerns and they're real. But while we fight for more, right, while we get our ducks in a row to be prepared for the election in the fall, while we prepare for implementation of so many things that we are going to be fighting for and hopefully win in the fall for the next year and the years after that, we have to also complete the census as a starting point, as a stepping stone to all of those milestones. And the last thing I just want to note is, I think the strategy around prizes has been effective, but I think, you know, even more than that, I think what's underlying the effectiveness of that is that the contacts that we're making every day, you know, with our food distribution or other ministries or other outreach, you know, our contacts and our contact lists, those are our gold. Those are our absolute gold. And there's an art and a science to doing that follow-up. And I would just continue to encourage folks, like we heard from all of you, is that, who are those 10 people? I want those names to be flashing in your eyelids right now. Who are those 10 people that you're able to make a contact and make a connection with about the census today?
Thank you, Reverend Scott, and thank you, Andrew. Again, your presentation was helpful, inspiring, and I'm hoping from what you heard from our faith panelists, you can get a sense of the enthusiasm and the commitment on our part. You've given us a challenge. We went from 9 to 10, but we are going to challenge those on our lists, and we're going to ask those who have other networks to challenge the 9 or 10 on their lists to complete this census. We encourage you as well to continue to send us resources so that we can get them into the hands of our faith leaders at this critical time. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And as we say thank you, I also want to say a very special thank you to Cynthia Zambucas, who was mentioned at the outset by Kaushik, as well as our COVID-19 Command Center's Joint Information Virtual Outreach Team, Coordinator John McKnight, and our leads, Lynn Mays, Sharon Walton, and Hafisa Salebai. They have been amazing. This is the 15th of these online briefings that we have done, and each one of them has been a jewel, and it's something that's very, very important. Again, we want to encourage everybody, if you've not already, to please take a moment to complete your 2020 census form. And next week, we are going to welcome Washington, D.C.-based Faith and Politics Institute Executive Director Joan Mooney to discuss the important work of her organization in these uncertain times of the COVID-19. So once again, we thank you for joining us. We encourage you to join us next week. And this concludes our program for the day.
Thank you all.